What's up, Sushi Squad? We back in some more Trove Lunar, and we are finally going to address the new and improved build for the Lunar Lancer. So I just want to let you guys know we're not going to be necessarily showing off the Lancer at the end game and the Delves and so on and so forth, because that's going to be a separate video. Today, we're specifically focusing on the stats, the items, the ally, so on and so forth. Everything that you're going to need to know about the Lunar Lancer and how to build the character now, because the character has actually changed a lot since the rework. Now, as of the moment that I'm recording this, the Lunar Lancer rework is on everything except for the Nintendo Switch version of the game. So if in the odd chance that any of you guys and gals watching are on the Nintendo Switch, just keep in mind that all of this is going to end up being relevant for whenever the update ends up going live for you guys. Now, before we get started with all that, I do gotta let you guys know, if you're new to Trove, you can use a sign up link down in the description, and then anything that you end up buying out of the cash shop, I make a percentage of that sale. It's an awesome way you can help me out with my cost of living and so on and so forth and blah, 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 blah. So Lunar Lancer, most of all, the biggest change from the Lancer was the fact that you don't have energy anymore. So energy recharge is a stat that is now irrelevant on the character, which is good for us because Lunar Lancer strives at being a speed farmer. You're not going to end up turning too many heads in terms of delves. So even though I'm going to have a video that's going to be showing an example of, Lunar Lancer at the delves and so on and so forth, generally speaking, you are using this character for speed, like our little Neon Ninja buddy over here. I would say that the Lunar Lancer in a lot of ways is maybe not necessarily faster than Neon Ninja, but is funner because you have a lot of movement abilities that can give you advantages. So your grappling hook can actually be used from insane distances to pull yourself not only towards, but also up high dungeons. And especially if you're in geode surface, a lot of dungeons are usually like really, really high up. So you can very easily, whoops, I grappled a little too far there. You can very easily just grapple your way up and not have to use too much jumping in order to end up getting up there. Or if, let's say you're getting really close, but you only have, come on game. You get really close to the top, but you only have like a little bit of jump. So you could actually use your #1 ability. Okay. Poor example, because this game is like broken as heck, as you can see right there. But basically you would use your #1 ability and then it launches you straight up into the air. The other thing too is, let's say you're trying to travel from a distance of one dungeon to another. You could use the ability and it actually gives you slow fall for a little bit, which can end up being really, really useful. Normally it launches you up in the air, but Trove is a broken piece of crap. So just don't tell anybody. Most of all, our club world, like, when there's too many things in a club world, video effects of characters breaks, and unfortunately that means that your animations break too. So trust me, it works better in the open world. Yeah. But the thing is, as you're using all of your abilities on Lunar Lancer, as you can see, we're just passively generating energy because what's going to happen with the Lunar Lancer since the rework is we're generating energy through combat. Good Lord. And ultimately, once your energy is at full, you can use your ultimate, which hopefully we'll get to use in a second here, just if things end up working out. Let me just keep spamming my grapple, even though it's really, really so broken in this club world, dude. Anyways, you use your ult and you get even more movement speed and more damage. So just to give you guys a quick little point of reference for, okay, now Lunar Lancer goes big mode. Now, I would say the most efficient thing you could do is probably just use your basic attack when you're in this mode, because your other abilities are going to end up draining your energy and they're really, really inefficient. And as you can see, they just, half the time they just break and don't really work. So I don't know. Basically, the point is that all of your abilities are useful in most of all in terms of giving you more and more speed, even if you just use your ult for the sake of speed. However, it means that you're going to lose your grappling hook when you're in your ultimate form. So you do lose that height advantage of being able to grapple to stuff and being able to do your slow fall jump. However, you're just going to have such insane amounts of damage that it's just not going to matter. Like when I'm in my ult form, I basically hit like almost max damage per hit, like max damage in the game. So yeah. On top of that, I'm not fully stacked. I am actually rocking a Crystal 2 spear. So anyways, let's move on to the gear that you're going to be going for. So obviously a full set of crystal. Don't even bother with stellar. So many people still have the idea of going for stellar gear, but there is honestly no point, because even if you go to U8, you can interact with the crafting table that's right in front of you, and you can craft yourself a crystal weapon, even if it's just crystal 1, and then getting crystal gear is way easier than getting stellar gear. So I don't know why people still have this stigma of, I'm gonna buy stellar gear. It's like, why? You don't need it. Crystal gear is so much easier to get. Anyways, what you're gonna be looking for stats wise is movement speed 2nd stat and attack speed 4th stat. Now, just to clarify, because maybe there's somebody watching who's like, that's not the 2nd stat. So all of the gear in the game doesn't actually have light on it, except for crystal gear. And in which case, just pretend that the light stat doesn't exist. And so the movement speed would go right back to the second gear slot. So that's why we always call it 2nd stat. Okay, so keeping that in mind, sometimes you'll notice that there is a 2nd stat reroll event right here on the welcome screen. Sometimes, not always, in which case you can go and use the chaos sports to reroll your gear and so on and so forth, so that you get either movement speed or attack speed 2nd stat on all of your gear. Because again, you don't actually have any energy anymore on the Lunar Lancer, so energy regen is not something that you actually need. Now for your magic ring, you're probably going to be focusing... Oh, why do I have magic damage on this? So you need a physical damage ring, and then you could go for crit hit if it's a stat that you need. Otherwise, I don't know, magic find, I guess. Generally speaking, we're kind of waiting until crystal rings get added to the game, because that's just going to give us some free extra stats, basically. But generally speaking, do not follow what I have for this ring, because it's atrociously bad. Speaking of, though, just to give you guys a heads up, that if you haven't checked out all my videos talking about the Paragon levels and crystal rings and so on and so forth, it's going to end up being very similar to stellar gear, in that a stellar 5 ring is insanely rare to get and can end up being really, really costly if you're trying to buy it off of players. Unfortunately, you can't use the player market, so you gotta just go and talk to people and trade. But with the crystal rings coming to the game, those are actually going to end up being a lot easier to obtain than stellar rings, and instantly are going to end up having better stats. So if you want to wait for that, just keep in mind, because it's probably going to end up being either a month or 2 months or 3 months. Who knows when it's going to hit console? I would say on PC, probably this month or next month, the update should hit. We'll see. I don't know. But crystal rings are coming, so you can keep that in mind if you don't want to end up going the extra mile of getting stellar rings. And eventually, you know, they're going to add like crystal 5 gear and stuff, because they just can't help themselves. So moving on, the ally is going to end up being the animated jug. Otherwise, you're just going for probably Raptor Berserker, just because you want to have an ally that gives you physical damage and movement speed boost. That's the most important thing, because you don't necessarily need to be using a cooldown ally, just because... why? You don't necessarily need cooldown in order to end up triggering your abilities, and you're not going to benefit from having cooldown with your ultimate being something that you have to generate energy for in the first place. The reason why animated jug is so powerful is because it's pretty much the exact same as Raptor Berserker, but it does end up giving you 300 light, and the light value is basically going to end up being armor penetration to all of the enemies in Geosurface and the Delves. So that's why that's important. So for a banner, I mean, get any banner you want, but generally speaking, you're just going for the extra light. Or you could go for one that has movement speed. I personally would recommend going for one with movement speed, because more movement speed is always going to end up being a good thing with this character. And then don't follow my emblems here, because I don't know why I'm using Shadow Strike. I really don't know. So you're gonna want to use Trailblazing when you can, but otherwise mid-game, let's say, like, you're probably gonna be using Martial Emblem first, just because you need it for the extra damage. But Lunar Lancer scales so much better now that you can actually swap off Martial right away. Unyielding is an emblem you can use if you're dying a lot, because it's gonna give you a shield. Chronomatic, again, is useless on this character, but keeping that in mind, you still want to use Trailblazing. What would be another one that you want to use? Probably Sure Strike. If you don't have enough crit percentage, you could use this. Otherwise, I mean, I think the only reason I'm using Sure Strike is frankly because I just don't really need a second emblem, and this is just giving me extra damage. So it was just, I think I just did it as a meme, because it's like I don't need the shield or anything. But Trailblazing is really important. In terms of the flasks, I mean, that's entirely up to you. I would still recommend Death Defying because basically, if you've built your character properly in Trove, you are not going to have more than 600k to 500k health, which means that all of the endgame enemies will more than likely one-shot you. So that's where Death Defying ends up coming into place. Of course, you can compensate by having Unyielding Emblem because it'll end up giving you the shield. And there's other options, like you could use Conjurers, which has a chance to recover a charge every time you get Magic Fine, and so on and so forth. I don't know, pick your poison. They are all good. They all have... you know, they all have their purpose. So Valorous Vial has a chance to recover 1 charge when you deal a critical hit. Generally speaking, I like picking the lazy way, which is Death Defying. And you pretty much are going to need Death Defying if you ever attempt to do Delves, which again, I would not expect you to do that if you're using the Lunar Lancer. So for the subclass ability, I mean, that's not super important really. You could take one that just gives you more movement speed, I guess, or if you just want the extra crit damage from the Fae, just to end up giving you more damage. But generally speaking, I don't know. I always just use the Knight because in the worst case where I need to actually use my mount, usually it ends up giving me a nice bump of movement speed. However, because the Lunar Lancer's movement speed is just so ridiculously high, even when I'm using Knight subclass ability, it's going to bring my movement speed to 125 just because my Knight is at 30k power rank. And I'm at 126 off of my mount. So yeah, probably pretty useless to actually be using this. However, it does give you extra flask capacity, which, I mean, it can be nice. But again, it's entirely up to you which one you want to take out of all of this, whether you want to have the extra jump or the extra flying speed, or even just more Magic Fine. I mean, it's entirely up to you which one you want to end up taking out of it, right? Yeah. So moving on to the gems, this is where things get a little bit more complicated and weird, but to let you guys know, the class gem ability is actually useful on the Lunar Lancer now. It wasn't useful before the rework, but since the rework, the ally not only summons way more frequently, it's still random whether it summons or not, but it does summon more frequently, and it is going to end up doing considerable damage. Like, these things actually slap. It's really, really nice. And basically, you just want to have it for extra damage, right? Like, it's just going to be something on the side that will just spawn in and fight things here and there. And it's just, you can just kind of ignore it all, right? So I'm using Vampiric, even though I shouldn't be. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. So Berserker for your Cosmic Gem is going to basically end up building up more light, which makes you hit harder. The reason I'm using Vampiric, though, is because dealing critical hit to enemies has a chance to increase movement speed and cause the next hit to leech. So the Life Leech is actually really, really good on this thing. But most of all, again, I'm using it for the movement speed. That's kind of the most important thing. Now, for your Cosmic Gems, you actually want to have all of your Cosmic Gems have 3 pearls into light, which can be pretty difficult to do. But generally speaking, for your lesser gems, you're like, all I did for my lesser gems was you're just getting so many Cosmic Gems once you get to the end game that you can just level up Cosmic Gems like they're nothing because you have Cosmic Gem dust for days. And so I would just keep leveling these up until all 3 pearls ended up going into light, and then otherwise I would just scrap them. And you end up gaining more gem dust back than you end up spending anyway, so it doesn't really matter. For the big boy gem though, the Empowered Gem, that might be a little bit more difficult because you might have to re-roll its stats a few times. That's where the Contained Chaos Flare comes into place. But if you want to know more about that, I've already got an in-depth video talking about gems. So for your other gems, not only the other empowered gems, obviously the mandatory one is Pyro Disc. If you can get Cubic, that could end up being pretty nice for just safety purposes. But generally speaking, you only really need to have Pyro Disc, and then any other gem that you have in slot is just kind of, I don't know, whatever. It's up to you. It's just extra damage and stuff. And beggars can't be choosers when it comes to empowered gems, you know. especially leveling them all up. And then what you're going to be doing in terms of the stats on them, or the pearls on them, is basically you're going to have 2 pearls physical damage, 1 pearl crit damage, and no pearls into crit hit. And what you're going to do is a 3/3 ratio is what I do, just because it's way easier to calculate it. So basically 3 gems are going to end up having 2 physical, 1 crit, and 0 crit hit, right? But then the other 3, this is including like your lesser gems, are going to end up being, let me see if I actually got one. So it's going to be like 2 pearls crit damage, 1 pearl physical, and 0 pearls into crit hit. It doesn't really matter if you change the pearls up a little bit. In fact, you can actually be more coefficient if I had a little bit less to my physical damage and more so to crit damage. But I'm just saying, for the sake of your mind, it can be a lot easier to do the 3/3, which actually it's not 3/3, it's 6/6, isn't it? Yeah. Wait. I don't know. Either way, you basically have half of your gems, including your empowered gems, have 1 set of pearls, and then the other half the other way. Anything in between doesn't really matter. The only thing that really matters is you don't want to have any pearls on your crit hit, and you don't want to have too much physical or crit damage. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's only going to end up making minuscule amounts of difference in terms of your damage. And Lunar Lancer is super duper powerful at the end game now. So again, you can very easily handle all of the geosurface and all of the end game stuff with the Lunar Lancer, but you're going to be very severely lacking in terms of the delves and stuff like that. But anyways, hopefully that ended up covering everything that you guys needed to know about how to build the character. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. People are always really happy to help. And I never end up bothering with food, by the way, just because it's a temporary buff, but obviously you would just end up using delve stuff that gives you more light value, like the electrolyte crystal and stuff. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch if you want to support the channel, and have a great day, gamers. Bye-bye.